I'm going to show you something really unique, a priceless Porsche 911 that also happens to be the slowest 911 ever made. Now you may be wondering, why would Porsche build a 911 that's capable of maybe 80 kilometers an hour? Well, the reason for that is very simple, and it's right there. If you look, you'll see two off-road 911s, and these cars did something special for Porsche's 60th anniversary. They went up the tallest volcano in Chile. In fact, they set a world record for going as high as you can in a car. So they went up to 22,000 feet above sea level, and like I said, set a record for that. Now, let me put that into perspective for you. In Colorado, where I'm from, we have 52 14ers, and when you go climb a 14er, it's very hard. It's like one step, two breaths, one step, three breaths. Atlas Everest Base Camp is at 17,000 feet, and of course Everest is at 29,000 feet above sea level. So to take these cars up to 22,000 feet, you're getting to the death zone where if you stay up there too long, your brain doesn't get enough oxygen. So the question is, how do they do it? And how do they make these cars so capable off-road? Well, let me go and let me kind of do a quick walk around, because obviously these aren't your typical Porsches. Now there's two of them. There's Edith and Doris. And you may be wondering why Edith and Doris. Just go down the alphabet. So the first version was right there, A, B, C, D, that's Doris. And the second version is right there, that's Edith. So Edith is the one that went up to 22,000 feet. Doris kind of was their first crack at it. So let's check out the cars and talk about what makes them special. First and foremost, obviously the tires. Now these are BFG KM3s mud terrains, much bigger and much beefier than your regular 911. But what makes it really cool is that back there is the same Boxer turbocharged 6-cylinder that you get in your current 992 911. What makes it special is that it's turbocharged, so it puts out normally about 450 horsepower, and up at 22,000 feet, you're probably looking anywhere from 100 to 200 horsepower, because you lose so much power when you go up that high. Now, ground clearance, much better, 13.5 inches, but there's something really secret that's hiding under here, and that is a portal axle. So most lifts, of course, basically you take the vehicle and you lift it and you mess with the angles of the half shaft. With portal axles, not only do you keep the half shaft straight, like in a G-Wagon 4x4 squared, but you can also change the drive ratio. So we're looking at a 4-to-1, which does two things. It makes it a great crawler, but also in its top gear, makes it only go about 80 miles an hour, actually 80 kilometers an hour. And that's why this is one of the slowest 911s ever built. Now, more cool things, come on with me. Of course, you've got custom everything. I know it looks like a 911, but it's not. All those pieces are either carbon fiber or plastic. Up front here, you've got very specific bumpers, and you've got a winch, which actually they had to use the winch 3 times, they said, to get up to the top of the volcano. This one, the one that actually did it, has something even more special, and that is steer-by-wire. It's the first car that I've ever driven that actually has steer-by-wire. If you remember the Infiniti, actually let's let him go. Let's watch him go, because the exhaust note is really good. So let's hear him go. Oh yeah. That is definitely not your typical 911 sound. That's because while the engine is stock, the muffler isn't. But I was talking about steer-by-wire, which this car has. So a few years ago, Infiniti came out with a car that had steer-by-wire. The Cybertruck has steer-by-wire, but I believe this is the first Porsche to ever get it. And the reason it has it is because you can change the ratio and you don't have to deal with all the usual stuff that you would in a traditional electronic car that has either a traditional rack or an electric rack. So what we'll do next is we're going to go for a ride, and we're going to tell you what it's like to drive the world's slowest 911. All right, so you join me sitting in a priceless 911, and this is Doris, kind of the development car. What they did was they first built this car, and then because of COVID, they had one attempt, and because of COVID, they had to go back, and then they kind of refined it and built Edith. Now, the problem with Edith is I don't fit in Edith, because the seat was built for Romain Dumas, who has gone up Pikes Peak. He's a very well-known French race car driver, and his seat is well, too small for my big American ass. So on this go-around of the course that Porsche has set up here in Malibu, just outside of LA, I'm going to be in this car because I fit. Now Porsche is very happy because a lot of this 911 is stock. The interior is stock. I've got actually a radio. I've got the usual controls that you would get in a current 911, even a little drive mode selector, a manual transmission, which was an odd choice because manuals are you know, much harder to off-road, especially rock crawl. But then there's a whole bunch of controls here for things like, you know, a locking front, locking rear diff. But sitting behind the wheel, everything feels, you know, pretty straightforward 911. I'm just amazed. There's even a little chrono watch over there. You know, the biggest difference, of course, being this roll bar, but with things like Jeeps and pickup trucks, when you go off-road, you get a lot of head bob. And here you'd normally be afraid of hitting my head on this roll bar, but because of the way that Porsche designed the suspension and because of the amount of engineering they put into this, they really worked hard to keep the car as flat as possible. All right, well, it's always a little nerve-wracking driving a multi-million-dollar prototype, especially off-road. But oh my God, that first gear is such a granny gear. Now in this car, I've got onboard air, which has been turned off because I don't need it. But for the attempt up the mountain, they had onboard air. This car has bead locks. The other car did not have bead locks. Porsche has, of course, been working really hard on trying to make internal combustion engines relevant, and the way they've managed to do that is by e-fuels. So we're burning e-fuel here, which is supposedly a carbon neutral fuel where they suck carbon out of the atmosphere, do some magic chemistry, and out comes gasoline that's almost identical to the stuff that you pump out of the ground, with the caveat that you're not adding any more carbon into the air because you took the carbon out of the air to create the e-fuel. So I guess that's good. I feel better driving this. All right, well, let's talk about how it drives. First, I got to give Porsche a lot of credit for using a manual transmission. I find that off-road, a traditional automatic with a torque converter is a little bit easier to drive. But Porsche decided to keep as much of this car as possible stock to show off just how strong and rugged their cars are. Of course, it's got the 4-liter turbocharged Boxer, produces about 450 horsepower, but up in the mountain they said it was producing about 100 to 200 horsepower, which is plenty. It's got a pretty funky suspension setup where the body is very flat, so all of the articulation's happening either in the big wheels or the suspension, keeping my head from bobbing left or right. It doesn't have atrocious sight lines. It's got atrocious sight lines. I mean, I am in a sports car that's meant to fly down the Autobahn off-roading, so I really can't see where I'm going. I mean, the fenders are huge, the hood is huge, and it's just a hard car to drive. Now we're going to go over 3 obstacles. The first one is a rock pile, and like I said, forgive the banging. Oh, there's a Wrangler over there. A 4x actually. So now we're going to head over a rock pile where you can kind of see how good the approach departure angle is on this car. I'm going to go to second. And I've got a spotter here, so here I go over the obstacle. And look at my head, it's barely moving. And I killed it. We're good. We're back in first gear. All right, here we go. I'm gonna go over. I'll do it one more time. All right, attempt number 2, this time in first gear. So maybe rock crawling, you are better off just to keep it in first and not in second. So he's spotting me. I'm just gonna go straight over the top. And easy peasy lemon squeezy. A lot of banging, but the car did really well. All right, now we've got a steep descent. So if you saw, thank you. Yeah, I can't see where I'm going. Thank you. So like I was saying, the biggest difference between Doris and Edith is the car that actually went up to the top, is that it's got steer-by-wire. This has traditional steering, and you saw what happened there when I kind of rolled back down that rock pile. The steering wheel just spun in my hands, and if I had my thumbs in the wrong place, I could have busted them. Luckily I didn't, but with steer-by-wire, you don't have that happen. Plus you can change the ratio as well, which is nice, so that you don't have to turn the wheel as much. All right, we're approaching our second obstacle, which are these elephant steps. Basically a bunch of ruts in the road. So this will show the articulation of the vehicle. So here I go, going through the elephant steps, and you can see it articulating. You can see that my head is not bouncing around whatsoever. Yeah, it's really comfortable. Thank you very much. Easy peasy. All right, and then I think the last obstacle is just a little bit of like a rock pile that you go over. There's a little bit of a cliff. So what's this thing like to drive? Well, it's like driving an off-road 911. In other words, you know, would I want to take this off-road? No. It's just you know, hard to see out of, and you can tell what you're doing is kind of, you know, Porsche did a really good job in kind of putting a square peg in a round hole. But ultimately, you know, the 911 is not an off-roader, and you're still sitting in a very tall sports car. So what's fun about this, more than rock crawling, is actually getting it into gear and like flying up this hill now. There's a little momentum now. This is fun. Two-wheel drive, up a very steep hill, back end's dancing around. Oh yeah, yeah, now that is fun. And I just did that in basically two-wheel drive. Of course I can't see over the hood where the trail goes, but that's where the car comes to life, right? Sometimes I think we forget just how wonderful rear-engine cars are at providing traction. You know, when I was a younger man, a lot of people took 911 skiing because they put some snow tires on, all that weight in the back, the car was unstoppable. Today, of course, all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive is a sign of luxury, so everybody wants it, and so everybody has it. Now, here we've got some rocks. This is kind of the third obstacle. I'm just going to go over it. I'm going to do it in first gear this time. Kind of see how the car does in terms of traction. Just bounce over it and keep going. Now guys, usually when I do these off-road tests, I always like to say, you know, the manufacturer would never design a course that the car could not do, which, you know, is the case here. But I gotta, you know, give Porsche kudos for actually letting me drive this car before it goes to the museum on a relatively hard, okay, it's still a dirt road, but for all of you like 911 Dakar fans, I doubt you would ever take your Dakar on this, because I think the car would do it, but you'd probably be looking at some pretty substantial repair bills. You know, on the off-road scale of capability, with one being, you know, a stock 911 and 10 being, let's say, a Raptor, or maybe a 10 being like a Baja 1000 car. This is probably a 5, but on the coolness scale, this is definitely a 10. Yeah, people would notice if you pulled up in this at home, and they'd be pretty mighty impressed. So thanks guys for hanging with me. So guys, as always, This is Roman saying thanks for watching, and remember, head on over to alltfl.com where you'll see me not driving $1 million prototype cars that have driven as far north, no, as far up as is humanly possible in an internal, any car with 4 wheels actually. I'll see you next time. Ciao.